Welcome back. So in this video, we want to go ahead and talk about the order of operations. This is one of the most important set of rules that we have for how to simplify expressions. So how does it work? What are we going to chat about? So order of operations, we're going to just go ahead and determine what they are. And then we're going to go through several examples on how to use them to simplify expressions. So the order of operations tell us what order we should do the operations in. Hence the name, order of operations. In other words, they tell us what operation is the most powerful and what is the least powerful. A little wimpy. Addition and subtraction at the end. So to use the order of operations, we have to follow a set of rules. The first thing we have to do is parentheses. Now, this can be more than just parentheses that you see here. So here are parentheses, probably familiar with them with English class, right? Parentheses are grouping symbols. We also have other grouping symbols that fall into this category and would be considered the same number one priority. And that would be, oh wow, I did not do a good job on that first brace. Try your best here. But braces would be considered grouping symbols as well as brackets. Okay, so all of these have the same power in the order of operations. And the key is you have to simplify what's inside those parentheses first. Only what's inside. Those parentheses tell you, you gotta do me first, okay? You gotta do what's inside the parentheses or braces or brackets first. Number one priority. Once you have the parentheses done, then we're gonna move on to exponents. And exponents are the numbers, the little numbers in the upper right-hand corner of other numbers. So like 3 squared or 5 cubed or anything like that. The numbers, the small little numbers that are in the upper right-hand corner of numbers or variables. So that would be your exponent that you'd have to do next. The third step is to actually do multiplication or division from left to right. So I want to take an extra second on this step because this is where a lot of people mess up. And why do they mess up on this? Well, what happens is a lot of times people go, hey, multiplication comes next and then I'm going to go ahead and do division. But that's not how it works. In fact, what happens is you always have to do what comes first from the left. Just like reading a book, okay? You got a book open left to right. So if division comes first from left to right, we got to do division. If multiplication comes first, we got to do multiplication. Whatever comes first, left to right. These have the same power. That's because they're opposites of one another. Multiplication undoes division and vice versa. So they have the same power. So that's why they're at the same step. So be careful. And then the last step in the order of operations is addition or subtraction. And again, these have the same power. Addition and subtraction, they're actually like the wimpiest operations. Shh, don't tell them I told you that. And basically, again, they're left to right. So same deal. If subtraction comes first, we got to do subtraction. If addition comes first, we got to do addition. Whatever comes first from left to right. Okay. So those are the 4 steps. We're going to go ahead and use those steps and try to determine how to simplify some expressions. So here I have 4 different expressions, and I call them expressions because they don't have an equal sign. They're just numbers and operations going on right now. So if we need to, as a quick reminder, I can always throw up the abbreviation for the order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, and addition and subtraction. Sometimes people like to call that PEMDAS. You kind of read it like that, PEMDAS. You know, use the method that works for you. Don't overthink that stuff because, you know, whatever works for you. Okay, so here's our first expression, 7 minus 3 times 4. So there's two operations going on here, subtraction and multiplication. Well, we need to decide which is more powerful, which should we do first. So we go over to PEMDAS and we say, what comes first, subtraction or multiplication? Well, here's subtraction, it's at the end of the rope, and here's multiplication. Multiplication comes first, so we better go ahead and multiply these two first. So drop down the rest of the equation. I don't care about the rest of the equation. I just want to multiply these two numbers. 3 times 4 is 12. And then we can go ahead and subtract these. So 7 minus 12. You have $7. You're taking away 12 of them. So you are left with a debt of $5. You owe that person $5. You only had $7 to cover it, but your meal cost $12. That means you owe them $5 still. So you've simplified that expression. There's no other operations to simplify. You are done. Let's move on to example B. So in example B, we have 9 squared. So that 2 is an exponent because it's in the upper right-hand corner. Plus 2 cubed. Again, the cube, the 3 is an exponent because it's in the upper right-hand corner. So then you have an addition in between. So we have exponents and addition. So let's go back to our PEMDAS, our order of operations. What should we do first? Addition or my exponent? So addition or exponent? Well, exponent comes before addition. So let's go ahead and simplify my exponent. So real quick, I haven't talked about this before, but just as a quick review. 9 squared, the exponent tells you how many times you should take that base and multiply it by itself. So 9 squared tells me I should take my base of 9, my larger number, and multiply it by itself twice. So 9 times 9, 2 times there. 9 times 9 is 81. Be careful that you are not multiplying these two numbers. You're going to run into problems because 9 times 2 is 18. And that's something else, okay? 9 times 2, just as a quick brief reminder, is 9 plus 9. You're adding 9 together twice, which is where you get 18. Just as a quick brief explanation of that. So don't confuse those two. They're two different things. Let's go ahead and simplify our other exponent, 2 cubed. Okay, the 3, or the cube, is telling you I need to take my base, which is 2, and multiply it by itself 3 times. So 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2 is 8. So 2 cubed turns into 8. Now that we've simplified those exponents, let's go ahead and simplify the rest of the equation by adding together. There's only one operation, so there's only one option. 81 plus 8 is 89, and you are done with that problem. Yay! Okay. So let's go over to C. So there's a little more going on in C. So we have multiplication, we have subtraction, we have some more multiplication, and we have an exponent. So what should we do first? Should we do the multiplication, the subtraction, multiplication, or exponent? Well, what comes first? Well, there's no parentheses, so we move on. There is an exponent, so we should do that next. So let's go ahead and simplify 2 squared. 2 squared. The 2 indicates you should multiply the 2 by itself, which will give you 4. So you have 6 times 5 minus 3 times 4. We did the exponent first, and then we'll move on to, well, multiplication or subtraction. Multiplication comes next. So let's go ahead and do that. 6 times 5 is 30. 3 times 4 is 12. We simplify the multiplication. Now let's go ahead and do that subtraction. Since it's all that's left, 30 minus 12 is going to get you 18. And you are done with the problem because we've rid the problem of any operations. There's no other way to simplify this. It's done. It's one number. Boom. Moving on to the next one. So 54 divided by 6 plus 2 times parentheses 8 minus 3 times 4. Okay. What do we do first is the question. Well, we got to do parentheses first, right? Parentheses tells us that we need to do what's inside those parentheses first. 8 minus 3 times 4. Now, we don't want to do the subtraction first because we can't, that's the end of the rope, right? That's subtraction is the last thing we do. So we need to make sure we're doing multiplication before subtraction. So again, drop down the rest. 8 minus 3 times 4 is 12. We still haven't simplified what's inside those parentheses, so we've got to continue on inside those parentheses. So let's subtract 8 minus 12. 8 minus 12 is going to get you a negative 4. You have $8, you owe 12, you still owe $4 left over. Okay, now we've simplified what's inside those parentheses. There's nothing inside those parentheses that we can do anymore. Okay, so we're done with that part. So this turns into 2 times negative 4. This is the part that often confuses students. So now that you're done inside the parentheses, we move on to the next rule of PEMDAS, the order of operations. Exponents. There's no exponents here, right? So then we move on to step 3, which is multiplication or division from left to right. So what should we do next? Well, starting from the left, it looks like division comes up first. So we better go ahead and take 54 and divide it by 6, which will get you 9. And you can actually drop those parentheses once you've simplified everything that's inside. You don't have to take it a step further. You're actually done at that point, okay? You don't have to simplify anymore. Let's go ahead, I'm sorry, not simplify. You don't have to keep those parentheses anymore. Now let's move on, addition and multiplication. Well, multiplication always is done before addition. So this becomes 9 plus negative 8. 2 times negative 4 is a negative 8. Remember, one negative stays negative when you're doing multiplication. Last but not least, 9 plus negative 8 gets you a positive 1. You have $9, you take away 8, you're down to $1. Sad face. You can go to Mickey D's and buy something off the dollar menu. Okay, we're not quite done. We want to do a couple more practice problems to really make sure you're understanding those concepts. If you're feeling good about these concepts and you really want to challenge yourself, I encourage you to pause the video, try these out, see if you're on the right path, and then watch as we go through them together, and then come back, double check that you did them correctly. So again, let's do our PEMDAS up on the top of our page, making sure that we group together multiplication and division, and addition and subtraction. So we remember there's 4 steps, right? And then multiplication and division are from left to right. Same thing with addition and subtraction. Okay, this guy looks fun. Let's dig in. Okay, 8 plus 2 times 2 plus 5 minus 6 squared divided by 2 times 10 minus 3. Okay. You don't want to keep repeating that. So, of course, we need to do parentheses. We need to do what's inside those parentheses first. So 2 plus 5 and 10 minus 3. We need to do that first. So I'm just dropping down the rest of my problem. 2 plus 5 is 7. Notice I drop the parentheses as soon as everything inside those parentheses has been simplified. So there was only one operation. So once we did that one operation, we're good. Move on with our lives. Again, just dropping down the rest. Have to simplify inside these parentheses. 10 minus 3 is 7. Apparently I was going with 7 for the parentheses. But what you can see here is that we've simplified everything inside the parentheses, so we can just drop the parentheses. Now we're done with parentheses. Bye-bye. Nice knowing you. We move on to our next step, which is exponents. It looks like we only have one exponent here, which is 6 squared. Remember that that exponent tells you how many times to multiply that base by itself. So 6 times 6 is 36. And we have 8 plus 2 times 7 minus 36 divided by 2 times 7. A lot going on here. Okay. 2 steps down, 2 to go. Next step is multiplication and division from left to right. So from the left, it looks like multiplication comes first. So let's go ahead and do that. 2 times 7 is 14. Now, as again, likewise, we're going to go ahead and go from left to right. As we do so, notice we run into division before multiplication. Okay, so sometimes people want to do that multiplication first, but it's whatever's left to right. So we have to actually do the division first, and then we'll move on to that multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this over here. 8 plus 14 minus 36 divided by 2 is 18. And then I'm just copying down that times 7. So 36 divided by 2, we simplified that to 18. And now we can move on to multiplication because it was after division. It was further to the right. So 8 plus 14 minus 18 times 7. Well, let's go ahead and plop that into my calculator. Feel free to use your calculator, no worries. If you're not super familiar with your multiplication times tables, that's fine. You know, we're all reviewing here, getting it back into the groove. Now, the last step is addition and subtraction from the left to the right. So I want to start with the leftmost here, which is 8 plus 14, which is going to go ahead and give us a 22 minus 126. And of course, you can just type that into your calculator if you'd like to, is negative 104. And you are all done. Yay! You owe $104. Congratulations. Okay. So again, remember that you can always go back and rewatch any of the examples or, you know, try them on your own or come to class with those questions on the problems. So now let's move on to our last example, which isn't as large as the last one. So it's like we're moving on with our life. So in this last example, we have 1 minus 2 squared plus 8 times, remember when there's no operation, we assume it's multiplication there. So 8 times 1 plus 3 cubed. So again, let's start with those parentheses. Now remember, the parentheses is what's inside those parentheses. So inside those parentheses, we have 1 minus 2, and we have 1 plus 3. Those are inside the parentheses. So 1 minus 2 is going to be negative 1. And then 1 plus 3 is 4. Okay. Everything inside those parentheses is simplified. I'm just not going to drop the parentheses because we have an exponent going on, so it gets a little tricky if we drop it. So just being careful here. Okay. So the next thing, after we've done parentheses, we have to move on to our second step, which is exponents. So let's go ahead and square this negative 1 to begin with. So negative 1 squared, that means that we need to take negative 1 and multiply it by itself, negative 1 times negative 1, which actually ends up turning it into a positive 1. 2 negatives multiplied turn into that positive. So this becomes positive 1 plus 8 times 4 cubed. We have to simplify the exponent first, so we've got to do that 4 cubed first before we move on to multiplication. So this becomes 4 times 4 times 4. You're multiplying the base by itself 3 times. I believe this is 64. Let me just double check. Yep, it is 64. Okay, I have no one here to check me, so it's always good to have your buddy calculator check you just in case. So 4 cubed was 64. I dropped those parentheses since we took the exponent, and now it just turns into that multiplication. Now, we have 2 operations left. Of course, we've got to do that multiplication first. 8 times 64 is 512. And then last but not least, we're going to go ahead and just add those together to give us 513. I ran out of room there, but you can go ahead and just fill it in there. 513 would be our final answer. Okay, so quick summary for you guys. Another way to remember it if you're not feeling comfortable with that PEMDAS is there is a mnemonic device, and this is actually how I learned the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So the first letter of each word indicates the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Caution, make sure you're simplifying inside those parentheses or grouping symbols first, and then move on to what's outside. And I guess that is all that I have for you guys in this video. I will be sure to see you soon. Make sure you're continuing to practice, and let me know if you have any other questions.